Hi, Maddie and Eli. Daddy here again. I hope you guys are still really well, of course, as always. I'm vlogging this for you today from the kitchen of my kind of lockdown studio, the getaway from home where I've finished up my book, well, I should say my last book actually, because I've started a new one called Weltschmerz, on which more another time. So yeah, I haven't really vlogged much for you from here because it feels a little, impersonal because it's more of a workspace. But yeah, it's been a bit of a getaway, like I said, a bit of a refuge during lockdown, and it's quiet, so it's a good kind of place to concentrate. Why the kitchen? Well, a friend said to me the other week, Ezra, you just like kitchens. And it is oddly true. I do seem to feel rather productive in kitchens. My mom was kind of like that as well. She did used to do quite a bit of work in the kitchen. Maybe there's some kind of underlying psychological theme here. Who knows? Anyway, yes, while I'm on the subject of the book quickly, it is, of course, imminent. Its arrival is almost upon us. Steve Poulakidis, the artist friend of mine, is doing the final touches to the big cover collage with a fellow artist who I don't actually personally know. I know his work. So they're busily finishing that up, and then we're ready to go to publication, full steam ahead. Yeah, and the new one I'll talk about some other time. We're now in the 90s of vlogs now I've done. I think we're on vlog 94. This might be 94 or 95. I have given a bit of thought, of course, as to whether I should stop at 100 before it gets unmanageable for you, of course, when you're older. But I don't know. We'll see what happens. And of course, we don't know what the country's going to do. We're now at the end of January 2021, still in lockdown, the 3rd or the 4th, depending upon how you look at things. So yes, nothing's going to change. I'm not going to bore you with more information on the situation with the arts, but looking at it reasonably, I don't think it's going to come back to any normal semblance of normality until 2022. So until then, of course, I'm concentrating on the work, also applying comedy writing things to various TV companies and such like. So I'm quite busy with that, and of course my normal, usual childcare during the day, which is fab and ongoing. But I haven't fully lost sight of where this vlog for you all began over 10 months ago now, back in March 2020, when I actually had the coronavirus. As I'm sure I've said in the previous vlog, several of us picked it up in the same opera company where we were doing Baleine Mascara, which we still hope that production will come to the stage at some point. Fingers crossed for later this year, maybe next year. But yeah, it started out because I was obviously had to isolate. Began as a kind of pastime, just to play a couple of piano pieces, and then I remembered, friends saying, "Hey, you've had such a crazy life. Why don't you tell these stories?" So then I started doing the crazy stories from my life videos and the name dropping videos. And you can't feel bad about the name dropping videos because you kind of produce a memoir. Oh yes, I'll write a story of my life, but I'll miss out all the interesting people and all the really cool stories. That's not reality. And these people shaped my character, and to a certain extent shaped yours because you are half of me after all, the best half. But yeah, there was a reason why I kind of stopped doing it, and it, of course, as you are well aware, it has grown and become something much bigger. I went off and started doing the music, the comedy, started actually scripting things. It became a much bigger beast. And one of the main reasons why I haven't continued doing the crazy stories from my life and the name dropping is because I simply cannot remember. It's over 10 hours now that I've recorded. I can't remember what I've told you and what I haven't. And I don't want to go back over my own stuff because, I miss you enough as it is anyway. But I'm sure there are a couple of things I haven't mentioned, and I'll quickly slip them in here if I may. Bob Tier, the tenor, was a wonderful, lovely influence on me when I was a kid. He would always say to me whenever I came backstage after his gigs, I remember Winterreise at the Queen Elizabeth Hall, where, of course, years later I had my own orchestral piece, Just Garp, performed. That was the whole shenanigans with I quoted a Beatles song in it, which was owned by Paul McCartney. No, sorry, it was written by Paul McCartney, but owned by Michael Jackson. So that was my whole Michael Jackson foray, which was rather crazy. But I went backstage after Bob Tears Winterreise and had a lovely long chat. And he would always say after our chats, "Good luck with the dots," by which he meant my composing. And of course the Amadeus Quartet, who I think were the first, well, at least as far as my generation was concerned, they were the first superstar string quartet. After that, there was the Lindsay String Quartet, who became the Lindsays. I never got to the bottom of that name change. But I got to know them as well, Peter Cropper and all those guys. Sadly, he's now passed away. But from the Amadeus, Martin Lovett was a fabulous influence. Funnily, we didn't talk music. Martin Lovett spent most of the time when we were together trying to coach me over my childhood stammer, which was very touching of him, I think. It was a very sweet thing to do. And of course, you wouldn't probably notice it now. And one certainly wouldn't in a professional capacity if you worked with me on stage, because usually I'm in charge or I'm singing the tenor lead. So I have enough confidence there to, portray myself without a stammer. Plus I pitch my voice slightly lower, my speaking voice slightly lower. I used to kind of speak like this, and that isn't very helpful for a childhood stammer. But, it was more about getting confident in myself. But there were all the fabulous musicians as well that I got to meet, if not actually work with. Lutosławski, for example, fabulous. Olivier Messiaen, Pierre Boulez, Rostropovich, or Rostropovich, as some people say. These people were, not just great musicians and part of musical history, but in some cases part of actual history, political history. Rostropovich, of course, playing the cello and playing Bach unaccompanied cello suites in the embassy back in the 80s, stopped it being bombed. Really extraordinary. And Yehuda Menuhin was fabulous as well. I knew him fairly well, actually, towards the end. He was very old by the time I got to meet him. I think he was already in his 70s. Yeah, he was great. I loved a story about his parents, that when he was born, his dad said to his mother, "Look, can we not give him a very Jewish name?" Forename, they meant, not the Menuhin bit. Because obviously, he might face discrimination in his employment later on or whatever. So his mother promptly went out and called him Yehudi, which translates as the Jew, which I thought was fabulous. And of course, there are all the fabulous stories and wonderful evenings that were had at my, now sadly gone, but at the time, legendary bachelor pad in Notting Hill, which sort of temporarily became a kind of cultural hotbed because people became aware they could drop by any time and come in for a beer. I was a young man then, and enjoyed that kind of stuff. Far too old for such nonsense now. But yeah, so Rhys Ifans, the actor, would often pop by. He became quite a good mate. And Mariella Frostrup and Mark Lawson, the broadcasters, were on my street, and they would always pop by. Not to mention my other friends who are not in the biz, so to speak. Your grandmother also was a regular visitor. Amy Winehouse, great singer. I knew her from quite a long time before, actually, but got to know her again. Martin Amis, of course, Ian McEwan, great writers. That was, it was a wonderful flat, legendary. It was painted red and black. I had my own kind of games room. It was quite something there. But yeah, I also haven't told you about the mysterious fire that burnt out all the offices of a London Underground, which was right near the Paddington end of my road, like a week before the union was due to go to court. It was all very suspicious. And I haven't told you about singing at Parliament or ending up on a boat with the band REM in Norway. Utterly, utterly bizarre. And I haven't told you about the very short-lived, about a week or 2 weeks, affair I had with the sister of someone who became the Prime Minister of this country in a castle in Scotland called Fingask, which apparently is also where J.R.R. Tolkien wrote part of The Hobbit. That was fascinating. And it was also the same place, of course, where someone in the middle of the night pushed a grand piano off a balcony to get the attention of someone who was staying there. I mean, crazy stories, but these people are fascinating, and they've really, they've shaped my life, and, as I said, may shape yours as well to a certain extent, because, of course, you are half of me. the best half, I like to think. So I'm waffling a bit. But I probably won't be doing any more name dropping or crazy stories because, we have to have something which you don't know in person. But I will finish with this, which I thought was quite a sweet story. And it was told to me by the great tenor Jose Carreras, who I got to know after I performed on that TV show with him. And then, of course, in Stifellio, which I think was his last role ever at Covent Garden in the 90s. I wasn't singing a solo in that. But he told me that he was great friends with Luciano Pavarotti, of course, the great tenor. And Pav didn't tell him that he was dying. Pav kept that quite private, even from his close friends. Although they all sort of got it in other ways. And I'll explain how Jose Carreras got it. Every time they'd meet, Pavarotti would make sure that, because, he was a very ebullient man, Big Lucy. He'd always make sure everyone was well fed and watered and wined and generally cared for. But the very last time Jose Carreras ever saw him, Big Lucy insisted that Jose Carreras come into the kitchen with him, and Big Lucy himself. I remember Jose saying, it was the biggest sandwich I'd ever seen. He prepared it himself with literally something of everything in the fridge. Every type of salami and ham you could possibly imagine. Every type of cheese. The pickles, it was just, the world's most decadent sandwich. And then he insisted on wrapping, and he gave it to Jose Carreras and said, you must promise me you will eat this on your journey and wherever you're going next. And Jose said that he realized at that point that Pav was trying to tell him something without actually telling him something. And I thought that was very sweet. But anyway, I must get on with other things now. And until next time, Daddy loves you always. Mwah.